There's yet another way to bridge this putative distance between facts and values, and that's when you look at what beliefs are. We believe things about facts, and this constitutes science and journalism and history and every way of talking about the world where we are making claims about the way the world is. But we also believe things about values. We believe things about meaning and the proper goals to which life should be purposed and how to raise children. And many people think that these must be very different operations of the mind. Now, I have always suspected that's not true, and I did some neuroimaging work where we put people in an fMRI scanner and gave them very simple statements to read. Statements like water is H2O, it's good to be kind to children, Jesus Christ rose from the dead. Statements from many different categories. And we found, and I'm not entirely sure you can all see this, but here we have 3 brain sections. We found on the left that's all of our belief categories bin together. You get a signal difference in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, which is reporting the difference between belief and disbelief. This is the difference between accepting a statement as true and rejecting it as false. And on the left, that's all of our categories together. But in the middle and the right, we broke out mathematics and ethics, which really are 2 most dissimilar categories of stimuli. Mathematics was just equations, just accepting true equations and rejecting false equations. And ethics was statements like, it's good to be kind to children, versus it's good to torture children. It's a very value-laden statements. And yet the subtraction, the difference image between belief and disbelief is very similar. And within the tolerance of a fMRI experiment, these are the same signal maps. So if the brain thinks it's doing the same thing when it's accepting propositions about facts and propositions about values, I would argue that we should be leery of imagining that there's a real disjunction at the level of our epistemology. So the way I now think about belief is that belief is a way of trying to map our thoughts onto reality. And when we seem to be successful at this, when our beliefs about the world seem to survive all of the tests that the world throws up, then we talk about it as knowledge. Then we don't emphasize that we believe something to be true, we know it to be true. We know that George Washington was the first president of the United States. Okay, we know that that would be quite a hoax to have perpetrated on everybody if that wasn't true. And there's clearly a continuum of facts about which we can form beliefs, which may or may not be true, which relate to human well-being in all of its details. So on the one hand, it is possible to live in a failed state where everything that can go wrong does go wrong, where mothers can't feed their children, where strangers have no reason to cooperate with one another, where there's just no basis of trust between people. And clearly it's possible to move along that continuum towards something quite a bit more idyllic, toward the kind of lives we are all living most of the time. And frankly, we don't know how far this continuum stretches in either direction. And there are clearly many levels at which we can understand the dynamics of this. The movement along this continuum relates to facts from the level of the genome on up. So it relates to facts about our biology, neural systems, states of the human brain, and at larger scales of analysis to social systems, economic arrangements, political ideologies. But all of this feeds back into states of the human brain, and the way in which brains are influenced by the behavior of other people and by states of the world. So, again, all of these truths about right and wrong and good and evil potentially fall within the purview of science at every level, from genetics to neurobiology to psychology to sociology to economics. And I think this is easy to see if you just imagine 2 people living on Earth. Imagine there's just a couple, and we call them Adam and Eve. Now, ask yourself, is there are there right and wrong ways for the two of them to try to maximize their well-being? Well, wrong way number one, they can smash each other in the face with a large rock. Clearly, there are ways for them to collaborate and to fail to collaborate. They could fall into some kind of zero-sum war with each other. They could try to kill and eat each other. Right? That's not the best solution for two people on Earth. How does this circumstance change when we add 6.7 billion more people to the experiment? I don't think it does. It just becomes more complicated. So what I'm asking you to consider is a kind of landscape of possible experience where the peaks correspond to the greatest possible well-being and the valleys correspond to the lowest depths of misery. And this is not just for human beings, it's for any conscious system, but we can restrict our conversation to humanity a bit. And the first thing to drop out of this analogy is that there are almost certainly multiple peaks on this landscape. There may be many equivalent but dissimilar ways to thrive, both personally and collectively. Okay, but clearly there are many more ways to not be on a peak. And the fact that there are many right answers here, the fact that there are many peaks, doesn't for a moment suggest that there are not right and wrong ways to move in the space of possible experience. And by analogy, I'd ask you to consider food. No one would be tempted to argue that there must be one right food to eat. There are many right answers to the question, what is food? And yet, the distinction between food and poison is obviously clear. It can be understood in the context of chemistry and biology. All of the caveats we might want to talk about, someone's allergic to peanuts, peanuts will kill them, but peanuts are food. All of that can be understood. None of that is an exception to the principle that there is a science by which we can discriminate food from non-food. Likewise with principles that usually work but don't always work. So many people worry that if an ethical principle is true, if there's such a thing as moral truth, like it's wrong to lie, it's got to always be true. And if you can find an instance where it's not true, where it's actually right to lie, well, then there's no such thing as moral truth. Well, consider by analogy chess. A principle like don't lose your queen is very good to follow if you're playing chess. It clearly admits of exceptions. There are moments where losing your queen is a brilliant thing to do. There are moments where it's the only thing you can do. And yet, chess is the prototypical situation of right and wrong answers and of objectively good and bad.